like to welcome Georgia Plimbley to the HorseTribe for her first webinar, and there's going to be some more to come, which is really exciting. So Georgia, for those of you who don't know her, Georgia's a horse trainer, stunt rider and liberty specialist. And you were based in Worcester, but you've moved now, aren't you? You're Derbyshire now.
Staffordshire.
Nearly got it right. So Georgia's started riding at a really young age and has been involved in all sorts of very, very exciting horsey pursuits. So I'm going to hand over to Georgia in just a minute and let her introduce herself properly. Before we do that, just to draw attention to a couple of techie things. First of all, when you're looking at the screen, there'll be a grey line between the slides and myself and Georgia's faces. If you want to make the slides bigger, you just slide that grey line either left or right. Also, if you want to ask questions, please type away and ask the questions when they come to your mind. We'll go through all of the questions at the end, but if you want to type them, please can you use the Q&A function at the bottom, and it just makes it easier for us to sort them out. And finally, the webinar will be recorded, and the recording should be available by the end of the weekend. So if you want to go back and revise all of the top tips that you've got, then you'll have the opportunity to do that after then. So Georgia, I'm going to hand over to you. I'll move that slide on, and if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, that would be awesome.
Great. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and thank you everybody for joining us. I'm very excited and a little bit nervous because this is my first webinar, but without further ado, so I'm Georgia Plimbley. I'm a horse trainer based in Staffordshire now. I've worked with horses my whole life. I was essentially born and put straight onto ponies. My mum did not give me much choice in the matter, and I had a very standard sort of pony club childhood, drag hunting and riding clubs, mounted games, all that kind of thing. And I kind of fell into the world of equestrian stunts in my late teens through a mutual friend. And it was probably, if I'm honest, something I was quite cynical about prior to my first experience of it. But as soon as I tried it, it really opened my eyes to a different way and different methods of horse training. And I was bitten by the bug. And so for the past gosh, I'm running out of my years now. For the past 11 or 12 years, that's what I've been doing full time. And I've very recently really heavily gone into the liberty side of training. And that's what I'm really trying to do now, is share my knowledge of liberty with everybody else and with all of you, because I genuinely think that liberty improves the welfare of horses and can help a lot of horse owners with their issues and just to really improve their relationship with their horses. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Excellent, fantastic, and get to know a little bit more about you. So we are here to talk about liberty, which a lot of people maybe heard the phrase but don't really understand exactly what it's about. So it would be brilliant if you could just help us understand a little bit more about it, what it actually is.
Yeah, well, I mean, liberty is derived from the French word liberté, which means freedom. And I suppose at its most black and white level, that's what we work towards. So liberty is working your horse freely. So working your horse without a physical connection of it being tied to you with a rope, and the horse being free on the ground, and seeing how we interact with the horse in that way. So that's what liberty, I suppose, technically is. Looking deeper into that, how we achieve that, it's all about the mental focus and the connection that we get from the horse. And I think that's something that gets lost on people when they hear, oh, it's about this connection. And I think for a lot of people, if they've not experienced that, it's really hard to maybe grasp and get people's heads around what that is and what that looks like. But it really is as simple as it's getting the horse to focus on you and give you their attention. And then once you have that, you can do so much. So that's what liberty is. I'd also say, and I say this a lot, and it probably sounds quite romanticized, but I genuinely mean it, that I think liberty is all about your personal relationship with your horse as much as you have interpersonal relationships with your family members and your friends and your loved ones. You can have the same relationship with your horse. And I think, again, that's something that is like romanticized in films and books. And I think sometimes people don't think that can always be a reality with an animal, to have that real relationship, but through the liberty you really can. And again, that's something I'm really passionate about trying to share with other people. So yes, it's all about getting your horse to focus on you, having your horse wanting to willingly be with you out of its free choice, rather than being connected to us with a rope. And I think, I mean, we as a culture, as an equestrian world, we've had such a fixed way of doing things for so long that there's almost, I think a lot of people almost don't even question why wouldn't you have the horse on the rope? That's just the way it's done. But I would pose the question to everybody else: why would you want to fix an animal to you physically, whereby it doesn't have a choice to leave, when instead you could have a relationship with that animal whereby he chooses to be with you out of his own free choice? And I think that's a question that we should all be asking ourselves more.
That's a really powerful message, isn't it? Because most people, I think, would expect their dogs to want to be with them and stay with them and follow them and go for the walk with them. So that's really, really interesting.
I like, it sounds strange, but I've got a little boy, 4-year-old, in the next room, and I know some people will use, training aids for their children. They'll use like a lead or a rope when they're training their child to stay with them and be safe with them. But you wouldn't want to keep your child tethered to you on a rope as it grows up. And I feel like the same, actually, if you really think about it, the same thing can be applied to your horse, or like you say, a dog. Ideally, your dog is trained to follow you, and you can achieve the same thing with your horse. And I think people just don't realize that that's achievable.
Yeah, no, amazing. And so technically, yeah, asking your horse to follow you, you said.
Yeah, so getting the horse to follow you, to come with you, and from that point you can really grow to any place you want. Once you've got that ability to communicate with your horse on a level it really understands and is most connected with its way of being naturally, you can ask questions whereby the horse will willingly respond and then will give you an answer that you're seeking.
Brilliant, thank you. And a beautiful horse in the background photo there.
Oh, that's Brugie. He's a pre-stallion. He's just the best horse in the world, such a gentleman. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. So you alluded to the fact that people have some misconceptions about liberty. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Well, I think the biggest one, and we've probably all been party to this, I certainly was, is we go to the county shows and we go to the big equestrian events, and obviously we often see liberty in performances and sort of like dramatic productions with a horse, and that's often marketed as this like magical connection that particular trainer will have between themselves and the horse. And for years, I mean, even again till I was like in my 20s, I really believed that message, like, wow, that individual is so gifted. They're gifted on a level that just makes them have these standards of training that is completely unachievable for anyone else. And I think now that I do it myself, it's such an untruth. And I think that's the biggest misconception, and that's really sad, really, that people think it's unachievable. They think they don't have that magical gift, whereas actually training liberty is just as systematic as any other discipline. And I genuinely believe anybody could do it with any horse, if they just knew those sort of techniques behind it. So that's the first major misconception I would sort of want to talk about. And I think the next one would be that you have to follow a certain technique in order to do it. And again, this is all about how liberty is marketed to us. And I'm not averse to different natural horsemanship trainers. They are all fantastic, and a lot of different natural horsemanship trainers will have something different to offer that is very particular to their method or their technique. But again, this sort of idea that you have to follow a certain technique and that it's very rigid and very fixed, I think is a big misconception. And I would definitely, for anybody exploring the path of liberty, I would definitely give the advice to go and explore as many avenues as they can and learn as much as they can and absorb as much as they can, because essentially the more experience, the more information they take in, the more the more proficient they're going to be as a horse trainer, and they can pick and choose what works for them and what they like. So yeah, that would be the next sort of big misconception that I would go to. Another one, see, there's a lot. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, but I think the other one, which probably isn't that helpful for my own marketing, but here we go, is that you actually need a trainer, or that you need to follow a system. I am almost entirely self-taught. I've definitely had help along the way, but nobody ever handed me this is how you do it. Nobody ever said, right, follow this technique. I never learned through following any methods. I very much learned from curiosity of watching and trying to understand, and then asking questions to the right people. And it was really my curiosity to understand how the Liberty worked that drove how I found it, I suppose. And so even though now I'm on a journey myself to help other people and train other people as they do Liberty with their horses, I really feel like what's given me my greatest strengths as a Liberty trainer have been the things I've found when I've been alone with a horse. And I think there's a misconception there that you always need help. And actually, if you're thinking about doing Liberty with your horse, or if you're trying Liberty with your horse, almost the most important parts of that you're going to find, again, are going to be what you discover in your own, because it's all about really understanding how to feel a horse and how to instinctively tune in to what a horse is really telling you, and then being able to tell them in a way that they understand what you're trying to ask. And you can't find that. Somebody could tell you all day long what that feels like, but until you really find that yourself, you're never really going to find the feeling. I don't know if that makes sense.
How do you know when you found it?
You absolutely know it. It sounds really cheesy, but when I'm teaching people, I often ask them to take my hand and pull me close to them, and they'll pull and I'll resist going to them. And then in the next moment, I'll jump and be very close to them. And I do that because as a person being at the receiving end of that exercise, you get two sensations. You get a sensation, not just physically, but internally, of like resistance. When somebody's trying to pull me closer physically, they get this tension or this strain of like, oh, I can't get her to come towards me. But then when I come close and I'm invading their personal boundaries and being really close to them, they have energetically this other sensation of like, wow, oh gosh, she's really in my personal space. And that sensation, you feel that when your horse connects to you. So when you are truly connected to a horse at Liberty, you have this real sensation of like, whoa, he's here, he's with me. And if you feel anything other than that, if you feel this sensation of strain or like, oh, then you've not got it. And so you have to keep seeking until you find that. And it's the most amazing feeling when you do get it.
Brilliant. That sounds amazing. I can't wait for my session. You've kind of alluded to some of the benefits anyway, but tell us a little bit more about the benefits. And we've got a few slides on this, I think.
Oh, there'll be a lot of slides. There are so many. There are so many. I won't know where to stop. I would say the big one, and the biggest one for me, is the improvement of the welfare of your horse and the mental health of your horse. And I think sometimes when I say that, like talking about a horse's mental health, I feel like I get funny looks, or I feel like people are a bit like, is that maybe a little bit maybe a bit contemporary. But I genuinely think, give it like 5 or 10 years time, and talking about the mental health of your horse is going to be something that's a lot more in conversation. And again, it's just sort of a new way of thinking about our horses. And so the Liberty really taps into that, because it's not just about exercising a horse and what we can physically get a horse to do, which if you think about every discipline that we do in equestrian sport, it's all about what horses can achieve as an athlete, like what they can physically achieve with their in the combination with their rider. And as far as I can tell, I would be very interested if people can challenge me on this. Obviously, their mental aspect comes into those different disciplines, but liberty is almost solely about like the emotional, the mental side of how you influence your horse. And I think that's a really powerful benefit, is knowing that you have a happy horse.
Can I just sorry, somebody just said that we haven't, the slides weren't quite sharing properly. Are they sharing right now? Can you see the full screen slide? Perfect, brilliant. Okay, sorry about that. That was operator error from me. Carry on, Georgia.
No problem. So yeah, the big one is definitely your horse's happiness and ensuring your horse's happiness, because again, the liberty will not work with a negative or with an angry horse or an unhappy horse or a depressed horse. I'm going to challenge myself on that a little bit, because there are some methods of people who train it in liberty or in horse show performance that is maybe less from like seeking a healthy relationship with their horse, and it's more about what they can physically get their horse to achieve in terms of tricks and what the horse can perform. But certainly the style of liberty that I teach and I'm an advocate for is really all about the horse's happiness and the horse's welfare being at the heart and center of what you're seeking. Another massive benefit would be the sort of clarity that is offered in the communication between your horse and yourself, because a lot of the techniques of liberty are really actually based upon how horses would naturally interact with one another in a natural environment. And obviously, like, I'm not a horse, so I can't go into an arena and run around and act like a horse and have the same effect. But there are certain ways horses communicate to each other and signal to each other what their needs are or what their wants are. And we can tap into how they do that in the closest way possible to how we can achieve it. And that's something we'll talk a little bit later in the webinar, and I'll go into more detail about what those cues are, where we're cueing a horse, which is in line with how they would cue each other naturally. And so, yeah, this whole benefit of once you've cracked that communication and you're communicating with them in a way that's not, well, I'm a human and I want you to do this, so I'm going to push you and expect you to do this in a way that I want you to understand it. Instead of coming at it from like that, you have to take, the way I look at it is that we have to take responsibility for, well, this is another animal. This doesn't speak human. This doesn't speak, like, I have to see and take responsibility for the fact that I have to find a way to communicate with the horse in a way that the horse understands me. And that's where liberty comes into play. And that really solves a lot of issues. So I have a lot of people who come to me with problem horses, I'll do that, or horses that they have certain issues with. And it could be absolutely anything from can't get the horse onto the lorry, to a horse that can't hack out alone, a horse that they can't mount, a horse that they can't lead into the field, whatever it is. Every single one of those issues, and I've seen a huge range of them, I always resolve them by coming back to this idea of the liberty. And it doesn't mean that all those problem horses that come to me, I say, right, well, I'm going to take it off the rope and I want you to run around at liberty. I don't necessarily go that far with it, but it's going back to this idea of just clarifying what we're actually asking the horse and the way we're asking it, and asking it in a way that is clear to the horse and not provoking it. Because I think sometimes, again, more conventional methods of, if a horse isn't doing what we want, we sort of increase the pressure until the horse yields or relinquishes. And that's sort of like a style that is seen in a lot of conventional horse training methods. And actually there's a much easier and gentler way to go about it, because often the horses, it's not that they don't want to do what we're asking, it's that they're not doing what we're asking because there's an element of maybe fear or anxiety. And so the horse is not going to do what we ask because it doesn't trust the situation. So once you've clarified the communication, the horse understands you, the horse will in turn with that start to trust you. And when the horse trusts you, he will do anything. If a horse truly trusts you, he'll do anything. If he sees you like as another horse in his herd, horses are herd animals, and they are instinctively programmed to do things together. So if you can get a horse that will do things together with you, you can get him to do absolutely anything. So I told you I would really go off on on chatting about the benefits. So in turn with that obviously makes you safer as a handler, because when you have a horse that you can clearly communicate with, that you break down these barriers in communication, you become more confident. And that's one of the things that as a horse trainer I take as that's what gives me most job satisfaction. Is it's not necessarily the clients that come and achieve fantastic things, as proud of them as I am. It's the ones who come with no self-confidence, and there's a lot. I think there's definitely an issue in the horse equestrian community with horse owners who actually genuinely have real anxiety or fear over how they're handling their horse or their riding. And actually, it's really rewarding seeing people completely turn 360, 180. I don't know which the phrase is, but the point I'm trying to make is seeing people become totally different and more confident in how they handle their horse. And it just takes that, once you take the fear out of the situation and the horse starts to trust you and you start to trust your horse, the situation becomes a really confident one. And then again, once you've got that with your horse, you can go into any environment, and as long as you have confidence in each other, you can do anything. And so yes, makes you safer as a handler, and it makes your horse obviously safer to handle. A point I would make about that, so Brugy, who you pointed out, the black stallion on the other slides, he's a big 16-3 pre-stallion. He has a lot of presence, a lot of movement, and I can load him on and off a horse box like at liberty. I'll take him from the field to the stable at liberty. He'll come and stand at the mountain block and go to sleep until I'm on him, and then even when I'm on him I can be checking my phone and taking a drink of water, and he'll be long rein, mares going past. And people always say to me like, oh, you're so blessed, you're like so lucky to have such a good horse. I wish my horse was like that. And I'm like, he is special. He's my absolute world. I love the horse, and I want to give him all the credit in the world for being so wonderful. And he is so wonderful, but absolutely every single horse could be as good. And it's almost like quite sad when people say, oh, you're so lucky to have such a good horse. And I'm like, well, I'm just lucky to have the relationship I have with him that's based on mutual trust. And that's what helps us both. Like, that's why I can achieve these things with him, because he trusts me and I trust him. So yeah, but like I'm saying, it's achievable for anybody. And then I'd say the final benefit is that, as well as being mentally fantastic for your horse, it's physically really beneficial for the horses, because obviously we're not on the horse and not influencing him from our seat and our position or whatever else. So they have to work in self-carriage. And a really good example is I've been working with Olivia Towers, who I'm sure everybody's aware of. She's a fantastic dressage rider. And so she's just been we've probably been working together with Wilf, one of her Grand Prix horses, for a little over a month now. And he has regular physio. And she rang me the other day and was saying that the physio had been out and couldn't believe the change in Wilf, because he'd always been slightly one-sided and always like was slightly overdeveloped on a certain side. And he's quite an old boy now, and for the first time she's seeing a massive difference in that. And that's because of how much Olivia's been doing, which is a real credit to her, in all fairness. But it's just that's sort of just you know, an example of the fact that physically it really benefits our horses as well. And there's a lot of lateral movements and a lot of like gymnastic movements that you can achieve on the ground, and a lot of the liberty exercises ask the horse to maneuver their bodies in ways that gymnastically are really beneficial, all about flexibility, core strength, but they have to achieve it themselves. We're not forcing, again, we're not physically putting them into any sort of frame. It's all something they've got to sort themselves out with, which is really, really fantastic. And then I think what we talked about is also the fact that you can have confidence in each other. Obviously, this is coming up on a slide, we've already sort of talked about it, but confidence in each other, and you really can do anything. And lastly, I would say it's also a really good it's a really good benefit for yourself physically. That's a big one. A lot of people always say to me at the end of the session, like, I'm exhausted, I can't believe how much running I've just done. So there's a benefit for us there, as well as having such a better relationship with your horse. You also get fitter in the process, so that's a good thing. Health. So yeah.
Great stuff. And so you've talked a little bit already really about how it develops a relationship with the horse. Is there anything else you want to add there? That's a lovely, beautiful picture again.
Yeah, Amira, see that? That's an Arabian mare, and I don't think she'd been out in the box more than a couple of times when we took her out to do that. That was filming for a charity film, and yeah, and we had quite a few horses in the water that day, and they were fantastic. But that's a really good example of the fact that once your horse trusts you, you can put them in all different situations in a safe way and in a kind way that's not throwing them in at the deep end. I didn't mean that as a pun with the image of the water. And yes, so something that's coming up on the slide about if you've ever trained dogs, this is something that if people at home have got dogs or have done dog training. I've done a little bit. I'm definitely not selling myself as a dog trainer here, but obviously in dog training it's quite simple. The idea is just getting the attention of the dog onto you. Once you've got that attention, you can take the training sort of from there to anywhere. And it's really the same with the horses. It's again this idea of getting the horse to focus on you, and once you've got that focus, you can do really anything, whatever direction you want to go in. And I keep saying you can do anything with your horse. A lot of people who train Liberty haven't got any grand ambitions to be able to teach a piaffe at Liberty or to do rearing or laying down. A lot of people just want to be able to handle their horse in a more harmonious and confident way. So yes, and talking about developing the relationship with your horse, a lot of it is about boundary setting. So in the same way that, again, it's thinking about the relationships we have in other aspects of our lives. So healthy relationships that you have with friends, family, loved ones, you obviously have to have healthy boundaries of what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. And it's the exact same with horses, and it's the exact same in the opposite. So it's important that the horses have boundaries that we respect as well. And I think, again, this is where often issues come from, is that we actually cross boundaries that horses aren't comfortable with, and then they put a wall up mentally. And that's when, you know, when you hear people and they say, oh, I just absolutely can't do this, it becomes impossible. The horse goes to this heightened place where you just can't do anything with him. You know, often you see it with loading a horse, the horse just absolutely says no. And that will probably be because the way we've asked the horse or approached it in whatever way, and it's hard to apply sort of a solution generally because they're all very unique in their own way. But the point I'm making is actually a lot of the times those kind of issues come up because we've crossed a boundary or done something that the horse isn't comfortable with. So from doing that, the horse has lost its trust in us, and then it's not going to go into the horse box or whatever that question is that we're asking a bit. And yeah, I very strongly do urge people to sort of think more about their relationship with their horse in the same way they would think about it with a human, because And this again comes back to the benefit of having healthier, happy horses, because really the root of all the training that you're doing, you should be seeking to have a truly loving relationship with your horse, in the same way that the people you love in your life, you want the best for them. That's the place you should be coming from with your horse as well.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think it was Andrew McLean who did a webinar, and he was saying, think about how you treat your horse and how you treat your children, for example. You wouldn't beat your child until if it didn't do something you wanted to do, you'd reason with it and ask it a different way, and all of those kinds of things. So it's a really good analogy, isn't it, just to make yourself question. Because I think historically a lot of us have been taught that if they, that sort of more dominant kind of approach, which clearly isn't the best way to communicate with anything or anything.
Yeah. And the thing is about the sort of, like you say, the dominant approach, which converge on aggression, I think sometimes, is ultimately it, in the end, if you it works, and that's why people do it, but it doesn't work in the long run. It doesn't fix things. So loading a horse into a trailer as an example, and again, it's hard to generalize because often there's different routes to the problem, but let's take as an example loading a horse onto a trailer. Say I've got a horse that somebody brings to me, and they say I absolutely can't get this horse onto the box. 9 times out of 10, horses that are difficult to load, they start off being a bit difficult, and when that happens, the pressure to get the horse onto the box starts to grow and grow and grow. And then often you see it in car parks all the time. Somebody can't get the horse onto the lorry, so everybody piles in, they get the lunge rope, they'll get the shavings, like the brush, and they'll start and they'll be and it is forced. We can't get around that. It's essentially we force the horse onto the box. Now if a horse isn't going on to a box, it might be because it doesn't want to be on its own. It might be because most of the time there'll be some anxiety or fear in relation to getting on the horse box. Now, certainly in my experience, if I was scared of getting into, I don't know, if there was a big dark room and I really didn't want to go into it, if all my friends piled round and chucked me into that dark room, it would probably traumatize me and further solidify my fear. And yet that's what we're doing to the horses. Whereas actually, if somebody came quietly, somebody who I trusted, and taught me through that there was no fear and gave me the time I needed to adjust and to, little bit at a time, consistent but gentle, consistent efforts of building up my confidence to realize that I am not going to be harmed going into that space. Over time, that is the solution. That's going to be what solves my fear. And yet we don't apply that to horses. Like we say, everybody piles in, we get them on the lorry, and whatever means necessary, we need to get them on, because, and a lot of the time it comes down to time, because, we're at the showground, we need to get the horse on, we need to get home because we want to be home for tea. And actually that horse might need 6 hours of just somebody who's willing to take the time that horse needs. But that's what the horse needs. And we have to, again, it's taking responsibility for the fact that we have to give the horse that time, and take responsibility for the fact the horse, in the wild, a horse doesn't jump into a horse box. We've taken it out of, even though horses have been domesticated, it's still not natural to them to go into a horse box. And we have to take responsibility that it's our jobs to train them in the right way so they feel comfortable with that. So yeah, it's quite a good example, the horse box, but that same idea of the way we approach the training can be applied to absolutely anything.
Yeah, brilliant, really interesting. Thank you. So let's ask the big question. What are the first steps towards being able to start working at Liberty with the horse? You've sold it to us. We really want to be able to do this. How do we start even?
Okay, well, it's hard because I teach so many people, and honestly, no first lesson is the same. So for everybody who's watching at home, I'm going to try really hard to sort of so you guys can go away and take something from this that is going to be helpful. But it is difficult because you'll all be in very different places with your horse already. So the first thing would be really just gauging where you and your horse are actually at. And so the thing that always interests me when people come and they say, I want to learn Liberty with my horse, and they'll bring their horse into the arena, and I'll say, right, I want you to lead your horse around the arena and I want you to halt it at A, trot it at B, halt it at wherever, turn a circle, back it up a few strides. And it's unbelievable how many people struggle with that. And if you can't do that, you're definitely not going to be able to do it without a rope on. So I probably should have mentioned this when I was talking about the misconceptions, but a big misconception about Liberty is that you train with the rope off, when really what Liberty is it's like really, really advanced groundwork. So I always start my horses with the rope on, and it's more a security thing, even though I'm training my horses towards not having the rope. You use it and you apply it where necessary as like a training aid until you get to that point. So in terms of people at home who are wanting to try and you want to gauge where your horse is at, that is the first thing I'd suggest you do. So you get your horse out of the stable. You don't necessarily, if you don't have an arena, it's fine. You can go into a little paddock. You can do it out, like if instead of going on a hack, take your horse out in hand. But first of all, how much influence do you genuinely have over your horse? And when I'm talking about influence, I mean like precise influence. So like I say, using letters in an arena is really, really good. Because if you want your horse to stop at A, does he actually stop with you at A? You might have a horse already that you've handled quite well and that kind of thing. If you don't, that will be my starting point, is just really improve where you are on the groundwork with them in terms of like leading and handling, and see where your horse is at there. Then you have to think about, so how do you actually move your horse when you're on the ground? So conventionally, we have a lead rope and we're told, you use your voice, you push the horse forwards with the rope and you pull it to stop, and you always like push, and it's all about this. In Liberty, the idea of the rope has to be, well, ideally like absent. So we always have to be thinking, how can we influence the horse or cue the horse or give commands to the horse? Like, how would you do that if you didn't have the rope? And this is where it taps into what I was talking about before, is about communicating with a horse in a way that horses actually communicate with one another. So what I would say to people at home, if you've ever seen a mare with a foal, or equally, if you go onto YouTube after this webinar and just type in like wild horse herds and watch some raw footage of how horses actually interact with each other, they steer each other. So if you look at how a mare steers a foal, if a mare wants to urge a foal to go forwards for whatever reason, she like urges the foal from behind, like she physically like pushes the foal forward. And it's the same thing in herds. Horses like steer each other and they'll like push each other forward from behind where the engine of the horse is in the quarters. So first of all, if you want to move your horse forwards, if he's moving forwards with you nicely on the ground anyway, you now need to look at how you get him to move forwards without using the rope. What you want to be able to do is that when you move forwards in your body, your horse moves forwards with you and mirrors your movements. So in order to train to that end, we have to train the horse to watch what we're doing and move forward with us. So you have your horse on the rope, you take a step forward, you move forwards, and you really think about your energy has to have this positive, I am walking forwards, positive forwards energy. If a horse moves forwards with you, that's great, keep walking forwards. If your horse isn't walking forwards with you, it's probably because you've always relied on pushing the horse forwards with the rope to get the horse to move with you. So if it's not moving forwards with you at that point, when you step forwards, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to apply vocal cue. So I click, as whenever I want my horse to move forwards, I use a click as like a nice vocal cue. And then the last thing you're going to do is you're going to drive your horse forwards from behind it. So again, tapping into this idea of how a horse would actually drive another horse. It drives from behind, it pushes itself forward. So the way we do this is we take the stick, which I don't use the stick. I don't even like calling it the whip, because it's not to be used as like a whip, but it's an extension of our arm to be able to push the horse forwards. So if you think in the same way, when you're riding a horse, you have your leg cue or the cue from your seat to get the horse to move forwards in your transitions. So instead of having that cue, our cue should be our body, our voice, and driving the horse from behind. And what I would really urge people is to try and really that lead rope that they've got is to have it really loose and really slack, and try as hard as they can to not rely on that to get the horse to go forwards. Your downwards cues are kind of the same, but in reverse. So when you stop in your own body, I really, really strongly, I always say to people, really think and feel the transition as you're doing it, because ultimately your horse will be in tune with you when you're offering enough of your energy to the horse. So when you come downwards in your transitions, exhale, bring your energy down and really like relax through your body language. And then you'd apply a vocal cue if the horse still isn't slowing down. I say whoa, but some people whistle or use something that's quite like guttural to bring the horse down. And then the final thing is, again, using the stick as an extension of our arm, is we put the stick in front of the chest and essentially like block the horse's movement in front. And again, if you watch a mare with a foal, when she doesn't want her foal to go somewhere, she puts herself physically in front of the foal. So it's again tapping into how horses really relate to one another and how they interact. So those are the two starting cues. If you're like, I want to start Liberty, these are the things that are really the foundation of absolutely everything you do. And again, when I was saying earlier in the webinar that I solve a lot of issues by using my techniques in the groundwork, a lot of the time, whether it's getting a horse onto a lorry or getting a horse to walk out to the field when it doesn't want to, it's often because we get so used to like pulling with the rope, and all the energy is at the front of the horse. But actually, if you change the idea and it's about driving the horse from behind, you can really gauge them, and it's more natural to what they are doing. I don't know if that's clear. I don't know if you've got any, if you want any prompts there.
I think that makes sense. We've got some videos, haven't we? Should we look at one of those more, or do you want to do a little bit more first?
No, we can, maybe if we go to the videos, I might get you to, annoyingly for you, I might get you to like replay a few, and point things out as we look at them. But that would be really useful. So these are videos from some training I've been doing from Olivia. I believe, did you say that you'd taken this from the very first lesson?
Yeah, this is from the first lesson. So this is the very first time that Olivia is using the rope.
Yeah.
And just practice. This is just start, stop and go backwards.
Yeah, exactly. So this is absolutely perfect. So if you have a look at the position Olivia's in, first of all, I call this the partner position. And so it kind of consists, so if we could just put a little pause in somewhere here. Sorry.
Right.
So that's perfect. So if you look at Olivia's position, I call this like the triangle, the magnet triangle. So I always look at the head of the horse and the wither/shoulder of the horse. And if you imagine they're the two bottom points of a triangle, and then where you should be as a handler is like the top point, that sort of gives you your place. Olivia's like a little bit in front there, but it doesn't, it's not too strenuous or too restrictive a framework. That's kind of the idea of where you want to be. And you can see Olivia's got her rope in the left hand, the lead rope, but it's really, really long. I call it the trip hazard rope, which I need to think of another name for it, because I will get sued if somebody trips over. So please, if you're watching this, please don't sue me. Just don't trip over either. So you have your rope in the left hand, really, really slack, and then you carry the stick. And I generally advise like a dressage whip or a schooling whip, just something long enough that, again, you'll be able to reach back and drive from behind. So that's great. If we can just play from here. So fantastic. So Olivia's going to move off. And what I've been asking her to do is, it's quite subtle, but when she wants him to move forward, she's going to reach back with the rope. That's fine. That's great. So here she's asking him to stop. And you see how she's not pulling him to stop with the rope. She's actually using her voice. And then she's using the stick in front to bring him back. I think this is this turning video here.
Oh, sorry.
It's fine. It's fine. So yeah, so she's walking forward. It's really subtle, but you can see with her right hand, she actually did indicate to him from the back of the quarters. So she's walking forward. She stops in her body. She'll use her voice. He's still walking forward. So she puts the whip in front of his chest and gestures it, like waves it almost like a blockage. And then he's coming back to her. That's really good. A good big little reward. And there she's sending the whip behind to drive him forwards. And you can see her posture is really relaxed. Again, there it's getting him to come back. And it's this idea of she's not using the rope. If she is using it, you can see she's like shaking it. And again, she's using that to reinforce her vocal aid. Let's have a look what's going on here. So here she's having a little trot. She's probably doing a downwards transition. He's actually pretty good, Wilf, because he's really in tune with Olivia's vocal cues. So he's picked up a lot very quickly with the voice. It's really good. It's really important that we always reward the horses at every single opportunity. So yeah, your forwards cues, always driving horses from behind forwards, and essentially like blocking them in front. But you've got to remember, when you're trying these exercises, you're always seeking ultimately that they're doing it off our body language. So you have to give them the opportunity to respond first to the body language. I think sometimes when people are trying these exercises, and Olivia went through this in a lesson I had with her a couple of weeks ago, is people will jump too quickly to using the stick for the cues. So they'll be thinking, right, I've got to drive the horse from behind. I've got to drive the horse from behind. So they'll step forward and straight away start pushing the horse forwards from behind with the stick, when actually they might have not even needed to use the stick, but they're so enthusiastic to drive the horse forwards that they almost like miss the chance. So it's quite a subtle art. And again, this is where you have to really learn to feel things, because ultimately you're always seeking that the horse responds to your body language first. I think in the next video, we look at turning, which is sort of the next cue, is how we get a horse to maneuver with us. We're always looking for the horse to mirror what we're doing. Yeah, so this is the first one again, just bringing him back. And he's listening. She's definitely practiced in this bit. Okay, so again, you can see her driving behind. So when she's turning, again, she's got to indicate with her body language where they're going. So she's turning with her shoulders. She's turning with her hips. There you go. This is really good from Wilf in these clips. And there again, those, when she's turning around him, which hopefully she's going to do again, you can see how like soft and relaxed he's coming as he's going into these exercises. So there, if you see when you're driving the horse on a circle to the outside, so she's circling him, it's really, really like how a mare would like steer the foal with her body. And that's what we're looking for from Olivia here, is we're looking for her to steer Wilf. We can, yeah, if I was going to say, if we watch through those again. So she's steering him with her body language. She's giving a bit of gesture with the rope, but then she's sending him, it's quite hard to see, but she's sending him from behind with the stick. And there she's driving him round with her body language. And to do that with a horse, you actually have to have quite a lot of confidence. It's where he's starting to really relax. So she's turning around the circle. If she needs a bit more energy from him, she's going to apply that stick behind. And then she's driving him round, and she's got quite an authoritative energy when she does that, expecting the horse to move out of her way.
He does too. He really starts to lengthen his frame, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is her first lesson, but when you start to get it, that's what you'll look like. That's what the horse, when he starts to offer you that, you know, you're getting to the right place in terms of relaxation, because again, it's all about this idea of trust and how the horse really mellows into what you're asking, and it comes from a really soft place.
Great stuff. So the next one, I think she takes the rope off.
Is this almost takes the rope off?
It is, yeah.
So the big thing when people first try to start taking the rope off, and if you have started doing like exercises with transitions and turns and you're feeling, right, I'm definitely not using the rope, the horse is in tune with me. When people take the rope off, often their energy totally changes and they suddenly think, oh, I've lost all control, I don't have the rope. And as soon as you feel that, you're going to lose, like the horse is going to leave you, because you're essentially not trusting your horse to stay with you, and that your horse will feel the distrust. So you have to really, really trust that your horse is going to stay with you. And I can't emphasize that enough. I know that sounds quite like cheesy, but I can see it in people when they start to doubt their horse. The horse always leaves. When you have confidence in your horse that he's going to do the right thing by you, the horse stays. And this is really testament to sort of Olivia and the connection she had with Wilf, and also how good a student she is, because she's very, very almost intense and thoughtful about what you give to her.
You can imagine how your body language changed and everything. You warm up in the arena outside for a dressage test, and as soon as you go in, somehow someone sticks a rod up your back and everything becomes completely different, doesn't it? I guess it's the same when they take the rope off.
Yeah, definitely. So you can see here, she's just practicing. What I was getting her to here was practice just those forwards and stop cues, the forwards, backwards cues, forwards, backwards cues. And at this point, when you take the rope off, if you've been using the rope to cue your horse to either go forwards or to stop, it won't work. So this is a real tester when you first come off the rope. I would advise stay on the outside of the arena, because you can almost like, you can use it's quite good to keep that pause where it is now, because if you look at Olivia and look at Wilf, beyond them you have the wall. If you think about practicing your transitions, if you have your forwards transition, so if you imagine almost like a wall behind Wilf, which is if Olivia has a good forwards transition, she's got almost like a wall there, because she's gauged the quarters. As long as every time she needs to get him to move forwards, she can either use her voice or use the stick to gauge those quarters. You've almost got a wall behind the horse, which you can apply, or a button, as it were, to apply. And then at the front of Wilf, if you have a good downwards cue, so if he starts to respect your voice and the stick as a block in front, or as a cue in front, just as you would have a cue with the legs to ask a horse to go, or a cue with the hands of the seat to bring them back. It's the same thing. If you have a cue in front and a cue behind, if you look at the wall, it actually channels the horse. The horse has nowhere else to, as long as you're solid in yourself, you have the wall on the outside, you can really get really solid forwards and backwards cues, because you can just practice, okay, forwards, stop, forwards, stop, forwards, stop. You don't have to worry about any of the turning initially. You can just work on that outside wall, and you don't have to worry about, well, the horse isn't going to go anywhere, because really it's only going to go forwards or backwards, which if you're on your game, you're going to have your cues there.
Excellent. Shall I put the next one up, which is when this is lesson 2, where you kind of up the ante a little bit.
Okay, I think for the benefit of people at home, so Olivia I'd come to see her, and she'd said he'd been doing really, really well, but he kind of then switches off or disengages. And in this clip, I'm getting her to, in the same way when we're riding a horse and we want him to engage, we'll do lots of transitions and like almost, up the ante a little bit. We do the same in Liberty. There's quite a lot of parallels, really. And you can see that when Olivia does that in these clips, he actually starts to get a little bit anxious. So he's not as comfortable with the questions that she's asking. So you'll see even there, just in his own neck and his frame, you can see he's a little bit tense. Here she wants him to turn with her. And he didn't really, but I don't know if you can see it when we next watch this clip. If you look at Olivia's body language, I can see it anyway, I don't know if other people can, as he starts to like do this tension, before he's even done it, she's not signaling to go around the circle. She's a little bit doubtful because the pressure's gone up. She's not sure of like the questions that are being asked. And so you can see the doubt between both of them. So if we watch the clip again, and it was something, so she'd said to me, she was like, I don't really know what to do at this stage, because he's doing well, but now he's disengaging and I really need you to come back. And so, it's quite an interesting clip to see, because like I say, transitions, turning, we just sharpened up. I was like, okay, walk, then trot, then turn, and you can see he's a little bit less comfortable, but still listening. And the way Olivia explained this is that a lot of the training he'd had as a dressage horse was very, very high intensity. So you can see here, she's not actually signaling as to where to go with her body. And she's smiling because she's a little bit self-conscious of the fact that it's getting tense and awkward. And it's getting tense, and you can see she feels a bit awkward about it. And then as she starts to relax, and I'm shouting all sorts of instructions at her, as she starts to relax in her own body, and almost be a little bit indifferent about his anxiety, that actually gives him confidence. And as she starts to do that, he starts to relax again. So it's almost a good metaphor that I like to, if, for example, again, it's thinking about my child. If my son William, if there's anything he's uncomfortable about or scared of, as a mother, I feel anyway, and all mothers have different styles, but I feel if I'm suddenly like, oh, and if I act scared about it, or if I act uncomfortable about it, that 100% like feeds whatever that anxiety of his is and makes him worse. So I'm trying to think of a good one. He held a snake the other day. He wasn't actually with me, he was with my mum. But my mum explained how he was really worried about the snake. And so mum acted very like, oh, it's just a snake, completely indifferent and relaxed about it. She held the snake. She showed him there's nothing to be worried about. He held the snake and he was absolutely fine. So it shows how much influence she had on Will. And it's the same here with Wilf and Olivia, that when Olivia comes down in her energy, when she's more comfortable with what's happening, that feeds Wilf's energy. And I think in the next clip, we really start to see how that applies and how that happens. That's it. We'll go another circle around you. And I was really telling her how even though he's anxious, she's sort of got to see it through, because if she backs off when he's anxious, he's going to learn essentially that there's something to be anxious about, because suddenly, you know, she's backing off. Whereas if she continues gently, softly, but with like a calm confidence, and you can really see now he's starting to, his ears on her, that transition was so much better than before. And you can see his frame starts to come down. I am really excited for this combination, and already the stage he's at now in comparison to these videos is fantastic. It'll be great for people to see. Yeah, you can see how he's really dropping down there and relaxing. And that's a really nice transition there. And if you think about it, you know, just getting a horse to trot and walk and halt with you on the ground, and look how easy it is for Olivia in terms of the handling of him. Like, she's so light, and if you look at her body language and what she's doing, it's really easy. She's not having to pull a horse or push a horse or anything else. And this is where it really comes, I feel like the truth really comes into it of, isn't it so much nicer to have this kind of relationship with a horse?
Absolutely.
Soft and in tune with one another.
Totally, absolutely. He looks great. And then this one, you asked her to take the rope off again. She was a bit nervous, wasn't she, this time?
She was. The thing is with Olivia, and I'm sure a lot of people follow her, she's an incredible horsewoman, extremely talented, but with an insane amount of self-doubt, which I feel is completely unjustified because she is so talented. So yeah, sometimes I have to play a few mind tricks so she feels a bit more confident. Yeah, I think she said, "We're not trotting, are we?" And I said, "No." And then I think in a couple of seconds, I asked her to trot. So yeah, taking the rope off. You can see she's actually so subtle, the cues, because he is responsive to, she's actually got the energy from behind, and it's quite hard to see in a video, but I know she's got him, if that makes sense, and that they're together. So they pop up into trot. And she was worried because up till this point, obviously he'd been quite anxious in the trot on the rope, and we just worked through that. There she's turning with him, really relaxed. And I don't know if you guys can see this watching it, but I think they actually look way more connected off the rope. And that I often see that with people when they're learning, because there really is an absolute reliance on yourself and your connection on the horse. When that rope's gone, you're really left to the raw tools of what your relationship is, and it either works or it doesn't. And it's a beautiful thing when it does work. And you can see it's really relaxing now. And there, she just popped into a walk. She didn't even have to say anything. She didn't have to use her stick. And there you can see that's just like towards the end of the second lesson, how quickly the horses pick it up. And I genuinely think it's because we're just speaking to them in a way that they understand. And you can see how relaxed and soft he is. And there she's just gently gone into a little jog, and he's with her. And like I say, for people watching at home, it's not algebra. It's really not. It's so simple. That what you're seeing now is genuinely the product of get those forwards and backwards transitions, of getting the horse to move forward with you without the rope, just getting the horse to move forwards with you from your body language, from your voice, or from driving them from behind, getting the horse to come back from your body language, from the voice, or by blocking in front. That's a product of just that, and getting the horse to turn with you, which again is either like leaning into the horse, steering the horse away from you, or really drawing the horse and almost having this idea of the horse like really wanting to be with you when you want to draw the horse towards you. And it's that simple. I know it doesn't feel that simple when we're practicing it. Everybody always says that to me. They say it's so much harder than it looks, but it's just relearning, and it's very difficult for people if they've had horses a long time, because it's like completely relearning everything you ever thought was right about how you lead a horse. And I'm like, put it out the window.
Brilliant. And there's a little bit of Olivia just talking at the end of the first session. This was, wasn't it? Should I play that?
Yeah, let's go.
Describes how she felt about the session. Let's make sure the volume's up.
It just feels right.
Yeah.
That's probably the way I would describe it. It's kind of like you feel like they understand you, or like the communication's there. I think that's amazing, because that's always something I've wanted with my horses, but there's been like a lack of knowledge about how to gain it. So when you feel that like true understanding, I think for me is where it gets emotional.
Yeah.
I think horses really have a lot of comfort, and they feel really reassured when they understand what you're asking them.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly what I was saying when you were saying, like, do you feel it, and how do you know when you feel it? It's such a good feeling, and it's really easy to achieve. Like I say, that was Olivia's. She was off the rope in her first session, but what with the footage you saw at the end, that was the second session. And they're like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So that's maybe like in the most like an hour to 80 minutes worth of training, and how much can be achieved just in that time, just from having like this different way of communicating. And I think I like to say, it's not magical, but it feels magical. It's amazing.
Absolutely. Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. I've just loved all of that. It's been so insightful and absolutely brilliant. I've got a session. Thea and I have both got a session booked with Georgia at the end of September, and we cannot wait. So excited. So excited.
I'm really excited to meet your horses. I'm excited.
I know. I've told them all about you. They're very excited. They're clapping. Folks, if you've got any questions, then please type away into the Q&A, and then I'll let Georgia hear those and can answer them. Whilst other people are typing and thinking of any questions that they've got, one from me is how, I don't know if there is an answer, but how does working on the ground actually impact on riding? What's the connection, and how does it translate? Because I know it does.
Massively. I think the one I've already talked about is like issues can be resolved under saddle, that from doing them on the ground, and actually just like the whole method of how we train a horse under saddle. I mean, most of my horses, by the time I've gotten on a horse that's maybe never been ridden, I know by the time I've gotten on it, I've got really solid, I know I can ride it, if that makes sense, because you can do that much work on the ground. In Liberty, forgetting sort of like general groundwork that you can do, Liberty specifically is obviously your vocal cues. So once you have solid Liberty cues, obviously what we've seen there is quite, right at the start of Olivia's journey. But for example, a lot of my Liberty horses, I can have them cantering next to me and going from canter to a halt in a heartbeat, and I know I can do that off my vocal cues. So then when you are on the horse or under saddle, horses that are dead to the leg, or horses that aren't that reactive, once you've gotten your good vocal cues on the ground, that can be applied under saddle, which is absolutely massive. And the same with as well as downward cues, the same with upwards cues. So whether it's a horse that's not reactive to your hand or a horse that's not reactive to your leg, doing the work on the ground can completely transform what's happening upstairs on the saddle. I would probably say, and answer that question more generally, when I was saying most of the work that I do before I get on a horse is already done. You can work a horse in a bridle in hand, and that's something that is done quite a lot on the continent, like in Europe, but just over here in the UK, I don't know why it's just not seen as like working a horse in hand. It's maybe seen as something quite novelty. I know sometimes you'll see sort of like clinicians coming over from Portugal with a beautiful Spanish horse, and it'll be like they'll be working the horse in hand. And again, people don't sort of think about it as a training method, but again, all my horses that I break in, by the time I get on them, they'll be coming into a nice frame in a bit in the reins, but from the ground I can steer them, and also from the ground you can teach lateral movements so much easier than from on the actual horse, like shoulder in, renvers, travers, all of it. If you think about how we're gauging the quarters of the horse, I've only talked about it in sort of a very elementary way, but very quickly in the Liberty, we start to influence the direction the quarters can go in. So in Liberty, you train cues all over the body of the horse. So I've talked about forwards and backwards, but we move sideways but towards us, and we might be able to move the quarters one way but a bend in the belly that way and the head another way. And once you can manipulate the horse's body in all different ways on the ground in a really soft way, you then don't have to force it under saddle because you've already established that training on the ground, if that makes sense. So almost all my lateral training I do on the ground first, and then it's ready made. The horse knows what you're asking when you apply it on the horse.
So do you use vocal cues for lateral work as well, or is that more from where the tapping cues
You
are?
can use vocal cues. You can almost apply a vocal cue to anything, arguably. The way I would transfer it from the ground to the saddle is I would teach it on the ground. So say, for example, I just wanted to teach a leg yield. So if I have my horse training on the ground in a bridle, and I can get it to leg yield in hand because I have influence of the horse's body, and then I've got him working in the bridle from the ground. What I would then do is I would put a rider on a saddle on the horse, and I would stay on the bridle on the ground, and I would cue the horse to do the leg yield, but then I would over time transfer my cue to the rider. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And again, the horses pick it up really, really quickly because it's as simple as applying your cue on the ground, then adding the cue to the rider, and then taking the cue away from the ground, and then keeping the cue from the rider. If the horse then doesn't react, you apply it on the ground a little bit, take it away, and then take it back to the rider. And it's playing with that until you break that down. And it really, that's the massive thing, is it's all about breaking it down for the horse. And that's something, again, we talk quite a lot about in my YouTube series with Olivia, is a lot of horse training. It's actually really simple. It's so much simpler when we really break it down into tiny little chunks that horses can absorb and understand.
Yeah, great stuff. And we have a question about rewards. So some people that we've spoken to and in the past use clickers or food or scratching in certain places. What's your thoughts on rewarding the horse for how it's going, what it's doing for you?
Yeah, clicker training is something I don't know much about. I know beyond sort of like the basics. So I can't speak for clicker training. The way I always reward my horse is like a quick release, and I don't generally use a vocal reward. Sometimes just out of my own self-expression, I'm like, oh, you're such a good boy. But I think the most beneficial one is a physical one. So I really get my fingers in there and I really like scratch my horse. And like, I don't really like a pat, and I don't really like when it's like, oh, good boy with a little pat, because I feel like, gosh, I like, what would make me feel good is somebody really like giving me a nice shoulder massage. So, and that's where I know a lot of people look at my nails and they say like, it's ridiculous you have those kind of nails with horses, but the horses love it. Like these are a great reward, these nails. So yeah, really good scratch. I'm not against treat training. I think that treats can be great when used in the right way and not overly used. So yeah, a little polo in your pocket or a carrot. Not every time your horse does something good, not shoving something in their mouth, but maybe at the end of a good session, or when they've really given you something that you're really pleased with. I'm not averse to treats at all. I think the main problem with treats that goes wrong is when people over treat, or when the horse starts asking for the treat and they give it, just as like, so yeah, the main thing for reward is a release, a strong release, a really strong massage, the odd treat. And I think the big one is knowing when to stop. I keep my training sessions extremely short. I maybe don't train a horse at liberty for more than 15 minutes. And sometimes it's literally 5 minutes, because the main thing is, as soon as they've given me something really golden, I leave it there. And I think, and there's been some times where I've thought, that was fantastic, I'm going to push it. And then I sort of like blow it because I asked too much. And I know that's my fault for not having known when to stop. So yeah, I'm really sorry. I might have to just grab my laptop charger because I've just seen that this laptop might die imminently. So,
well,
am I right?
to be honest, we're just about out of time anyway.
Okay.
I was just going to quickly put the last slide up, which is about your contacts.
Okay.
Feel free to go get your charger if you need it. But just so if people know how to get hold of you, because Georgia does do clinics, and you do clinics both at in the local area to where you are, but you also can travel to people, and and do large clinics with 10 or so people in a day, can't you?
Yeah.
So you can get hold of her on Facebook, Instagram, and the YouTube channel.
Yes.
So please do feel free to get in touch with Georgia. She'd love to hear from people and help people find out more about liberty.
Yeah, I absolutely would. The clinics are open to anybody. I guess a lot of people say I'm not that experienced, so I don't know if I can bring my horse. I haven't done that much. It's really open to anybody, any age, any ability, any horse. You're more than welcome to come to the clinics. Like I said, like you say, they're all around the country. So I've just finished my UK summer clinic tour, and I'm announcing the winter one. I have sneakily put a couple of dates out already, but I'll be touring the UK this winter, and I'm going to be doing quite a lot in sort of the northwest region as well.
Yeah, and if anybody's in Shropshire and they want to come along when George is with us, then let us know.
Yeah.
And finally, just to let people know what's coming up in the next few webinars, we've got a little breakdown until September, and then if you want to find out more about clicker training, we've got Trudy Dempsey coming to talk about, who's a behaviourist and clicker trainer, and she's going to talk about using clicker training to solve problems, which will be really interesting. And George is back again, which is very exciting. This time going to talk about how to stay safe and fall correctly, which is sort of going back to her stunt riding days, and some of the really, really important lessons about how to build people's confidence by helping them know what to do, isn't it, I guess?
Yeah, exactly. Again, this is about a lot of people who are not that confident, and a lot of people's lack of confidence comes from this fear of falling, and this is all about taking that fear of falling away.
I know, again, can't wait for that because I've got one of those. And then end of September, we've got Jason Webb, who's a horse trainer, and he's going to come and talk to us about solving some of the problems that we have around clipping horses. And just as a reminder, re-clipping, we've got a brilliant clipping webinar if anybody is getting ready. No, it's far too early to talk about clipping just yet, but those long hairs will be coming soon, and there's a brilliant clipping webinar that's in the back catalogue, so if anybody wants to have a look at that, then please do.
Jason's cracking as well. I'm definitely going to be tuning in for that one.
Brilliant. And I think that's all we have time for, so just remains to say thank you so much, Georgia. That's been really brilliantly insightful and very exciting. Guys, when you leave the webinar, there is a short questionnaire. If you're able just to fill it in for us, that's brilliant, and also gives us new ideas for webinars in the future. I think that's it from us. So Georgia, thank you. It's been amazing.
Thank you very much, and good luck with everybody with your liberty journeys.
Thank you.